This video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition, battle-tested nutrition, expert formulated supplements. Use code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, guys. Hey, Paul here. Today I have Justin Harris with me from Troponin Nutrition and his new supplement company, First Detachment Nutrition. Justin's been my coach for a year and a half, almost 2 years now, something like that. Helped me get ready for a contest last year and helped me with that crazy rebound I had this off season. But anyway, how's it going, Justin?
Good. How you doing? Glad to be here. I've been excited about this.
I'm good. This is actually the first time we've ever talked.
In person, yeah.
I've been with Justin for a while, and we've never actually talked. I texted the fuck out of him on my contest prep. He probably got tired of.
Well, it's funny because that's one of the weird things about this sport is because you have the YouTube channel and then you probably hear me. So I've heard your voice 1,000 times, just never directly at me.
Never at you. Yeah, yes. It's funny with this YouTube thing. It took off quicker than what I was expecting. I get dudes walking up to me at the gym now asking to take
their good videos. They're good videos.
Yeah, they're like, "Hey, are you that guy on YouTube?" I'm like, "Yeah, man,
awesome.
that's me. That's fun. It's really funny." But anyway, yeah, Justin and I have been working together for a year and a half now, and Justin just started his nutrition company. I've been I'm trying out some of the supplements. I'm using the fat burners right now, which I'll tell you, man, those things are crazy, dude.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no wasted product. They were designed for what I do. They were designed for contest prep. I mean, really, they were designed to be mixed with ephedrine. We obviously couldn't do that, and we can't market it that way. But the ingredients were designed really 100% for that. And then even more so, the issue, there's always been like the ECY stack, ephedrine, caffeine, and yohimbine stack,
Yeah.
The problem is that I find about 30 to 35% of people can't tolerate the standard 5 milligram dose of yohimbine. They don't feel good. So we lowered that to 2.5 to take the edge off a little bit, but we also added teacrine, which kind of has teacrine works the same as caffeine. Caffeine is an adenosine antagonist. Teacrine doesn't antagonize the adenosine receptor, but it does reduce adenosine levels in the body, and that kind of takes the way teacrine works with that, and then some of its effects on dopamine, and then just general mood, and it's kind of an anxiolytic. It really helps take the edge off the yohimbine on top of being a good fat burner on its own.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember last year, but when we were doing prep, I had to stop the yohimbine. It made me feel like I was going to puke, man.
It's like at least 1 in 3 clients have had to over the years. So that's why we were really particular about the dose and then the additional ingredients to kind of offset that edge. And so far, we've only been in production for 2 weeks, and we have, a couple months of rough samples with people. I've had zero clients have to stop it or complain about it. Whether they might just be trying to convince themselves this time because it's a new product, but whatever it is, it's.
Yeah, I've had zero issues so far, other than peeing like 5 times at night. Yeah. So. Yeah. It's probably the teacrine and the caffeine, I would assume, but
yeah, and then it's got the EGCG, the green tea, but it's standardized for the actual ingredient EGCG in green tea. That's kind of a metabolic stimulant and fat burner.
Well, there's definitely it seems to be a diuretic effect to it as well. I also like my weight, my metabolism always seems to spin up as I go.
Oh, man, your metabolism is wild. It's like trying to land. It's like trying to land a falling spaceship on a moving target. Like bringing you in at the end, because your metabolism will just start running away. Because you don't have to eat that much food in the off season to really add size. But then we kind of really have to push it at first to get things rolling in the fat loss. We go pretty low calorie for your size. But then once it starts snowballing, if we don't get ahead of it and start, bringing in calories really high on the high day or reworking things, your metabolism just takes off.
Yeah, I noticed the first week I added I've been on the fat burner for 2 weeks now. The first week that I added it in, I think I lost like 3.5, 4 pounds. The first couple of weeks of dieting, I usually never lose much weight. Mm-hmm. And then I noticed the first week I lost 3.5 pounds. And then this past week, dude, I've been losing a pound a day almost.
Yeah, I was expecting. We're going to have to start doing some mega high days and really play with it. That's the other thing. With you've added so much size, it's really a whole new ball game. That's the there's two different contest preps. There's the contest prep that 99% of bodybuilders ever know, which is just like hunger, starvation, fatigue, low calories, because that's 99% of people never really build the muscle mass or the metabolism to have the second type of contest prep, which is the type that like pros and top national competitors have to deal with, which is, yes, you're hungry, but it's not just straight starving cardio pushing. It's you got to be careful to pull the brakes and fill back out. It's a balancing act. When your metabolism gets that high and you have that much muscle, you can go off the cliff in a hurry. We kind of saw that with you at the end of your first prep.
Yeah, I think I lost 20 pounds in like the last 2 weeks or something crazy. Like, and you kept giving me food, man. I kept losing weight. It was we'll be more prepared for it this year, but you're actually like the example of why coach. I mean, not that anyone should stick with a coach just to stick with a coach. Try people out there, find someone that you work with. But why coach hopping is bad, because if we would have separated after your first contest, we would have not been able to use all those tools that we learned in the rebound in the off season, which was just absolutely insane. Probably one of the top 5 off seasons, at least for sure, that I've ever seen in bodybuilding. Yeah, it was insane for me. I wish I could say I did something special, dude, but
you did. That's the classic thing, is that's all the people on the forums, all the people that think there's some magic cycle or some secret formula. You are the perfect example. It's generally what benefits the most long term is to get really, really lean, and that's when the growth really starts. So you get really, really lean that first contest, and you got you too lean and over dieted. But then your metabolism is revved up and your appetite's fired up, so we can put those calories to use without burning out your appetite. We can load a ton of good, clean food, and then it's simple. It's train really hard, and there's all types of training. I know you went higher volume, and that worked for you. I like to do more progressive overload usually, but some kind of training that really produces a stimulus that you enjoy to do and you're excited to do, and then a shit ton of good, clean food. Lean meats, rice, oats, healthy fats, and then the standard cycle. That's all it is. It's just that people never put that chicken and rice. And actually, I was on a website where someone was saying something like that about the secret, yada yada, and then someone jumped in and they were like, yeah, these guys will have you believe that you're going to get big on chicken and rice. You can't get big on chicken and rice. And I was like, that's exactly it. That's what you're all missing. That's what it is. It's eating ass loads of meat and rice, and that people don't want to accept that.
Yeah, I have some guys I help out here and there. I have a few people I coach, and they're like always looking for some protein powder or whatever. And I'm like, dude, be the champion and eat chicken and rice, and you'll get big.
That's what the sport is who, and not just chicken and rice. That's just the easy catch.
Well, meat and rice.
Who can eat the most lean meat and rice basically without losing their mind every 3 hours for a decade. And if you can do that,
I will tell you, most motherfuckers though think that the diet is optional. I know I've heard you say that before, but I just like, oh my God, it frustrates the hell out of me how many people will not follow the diet. And
what blows my mind with that is you can look at things. You don't have to know anything, and you can just do an observational analysis. And about 1 to 3 million Americans use PEDs in any given year. And you can probably at least 90, probably like closer to 99% of those are males, and probably 90% of those are 18 to 35-year-old males. So you got, let's say take the high end of that, and let's take the low end and say just only 1 million people use that. Well, how many 18 to 35-year-old males do you think there are in the United States? Less than 100 million. You got 1 in 100 men and 1 in 100 people. So if you see 100 dudes, one of them, that doesn't count. How many 18 to 35-year-old men go to the gym regularly?
Almost none. It's got to be a fraction of 1%.
Yeah, one out of 10. So you're talking like at that point, a large portion of the people at the gym are on gear. If you do, there's probably less than 30 million guys that go to the gym regularly and serious about it. And so if 3 million of those are on anabolics, 1 in 10 people in every gym in America is on PEDs, and they're all doing the same workout. You do bench press for chest, dumbbell press for chest, you do leg press for legs. Everyone does the same workouts. So if everyone's on gear and everyone's doing the same workouts, why do some people look like bodybuilders and some people don't? The only remaining variable is the diet.
Yeah, I tell people, to me, I don't know, maybe you disagree, but for me, I think the most important driver for the sport is diet compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Following the diet, it doesn't matter what fucking gear you take if you aren't eating, or you're eating like shit, and it doesn't matter how you train if you don't have enough nutrition to support that training.
100%. And then with the gear too, it's like how many. There's like 50 compounds total ever produced as far as PEDs. There's not that many. You know, it doesn't take long to work through them and realize there's no secret formula. You know, if there was like 37,000 different PEDs and various combinations, but it's like, you know, test primobolan, GH, and insulin. That's it. By 6 months in, you should know that, and then that you've maxed that out. That's it. You know, so it just. The other thing is, if you sit around and hang out with like gym rats, they'll want to talk about gear, which makes sense because it's newer and exciting for them, and they're probably not that many cycles in it, but it's an exciting thing. But that's what they want to sit around and talk about. You sit around with pros or top amateurs, all they talk about is food. No one asks each other cycle. They talk about food. That's it. Because that's like the full-on obsession. That is your life as a bodybuilder, is eating. That's your life. You don't, if you got a road trip, if you're going to visit your parents, what's your first thought? I gotta have my meals packed. You know, yeah. It's just, you know, that's it. That's life.
It's funny, since I started this channel, I watch the analytics on the videos, and I honestly, like, the gear kind of bores me because there's only so, like you said, there's only so much to know about it. And really in the sport, there's only, you know, a half dozen or so compounds that guys even use regularly. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Everybody's doing the same stuff.
Yeah, everybody's doing the same stuff. And then when I put videos up, I put something up about nutrition, it gets like almost no views. I put something up about a crazy trend and test cycle. It gets 5 times what, but anyway.
Yeah, it sucks. And it is what it is, because I mean, let's be honest, if I see clickbait, you know, oh my God, test and trend, I'm probably clicking on it too, you know.
Well, I mean, you know, from working with people, and I try to tell these guys, you know, I'm lucky enough to work out at a gym where there's quite a few pros that work out, and you know, and I've known the guys over the years, and I've talked to them, and I don't think dudes believe me when I tell them that they're just doing basic shit.
There only is basic shit. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why they think there's some magic thing. There's, you know, and that makes that's obvious too. You know, you have scientists developing these chemicals years ago. You know, they don't typically develop the worst stuff, and then the 70th iteration they suddenly develop something really good. I mean, the obvious choice is almost always the first thing that's developed. You know, they synthesize testosterone, and then it's really clear what's a kind of a derivative that will have really good protein synthesis benefits, and that would be like Dianabol. You know, right. It's not. The further you get along, the more exotic you get, the less likely you get that's going to be a really stellar compound. Because if it was really stellar, one of the brilliant scientists working on these things would have recognized the chemical structure of it earlier, you know? And so right. It's really, every new compound is much, much less likely to be more effective than the previous.
And at the end of the day, you know, in your off season, when you're trying to accumulate size, really, muscle protein synthesis is the thing that we're most concerned about.
Yeah, it's always the limiting factor. It's always the food, you know. And I hate to keep cutting you off, but you can do the same thing, observational analysis with this. It's not going to be training for most people. Most people are training sufficiently hard, and you can kind of check it yourself. You can say, okay, if I only did 1 set at the gym and I started doing 2 sets, I'm going to grow more. You can expect, you know, and if I was doing 2 and I had a 3rd set, you know, there's going to be a linear increase in growth. And you can do that up to some number of sets. But at some point, and any of us listening right now, none of us can say to ourselves, if I do 1 more set every workout, I can guarantee a linear increase in growth. They can't. We don't know that one, because if that was, we would be doing that extra set. So we're already in some state where we're probably training to produce a stimulus that's more than we can cover with the food and supplements.
Right.
So the way to maximize growth at this point is to be more efficient with the food, you know, with the food.
You talk about food efficiency. I kind of use myself as a guinea pig sometimes. I know it's probably stupid at my age, but this past off season, you know, sometimes I think I'm like borderline diabetic or pre-diabetic or whatever, and I felt like my limiting factor before was how I was partitioning nutrients, and I played around. I know it's not your suggested protocol, but I played around with running Lantus daily and pushing my metformin doses higher, and I was splitting those doses up throughout the day to keep constant levels of the metformin through. And then, you know, on the high days, I would put the human log in as necessary. And I'll be honest with you, man, that combined with the high volume training, I think that's why I packed on so much fucking weight, Justin.
It is, and I'll give a couple caveats with that. First,
I use less gear too, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for the most part, what happens, everyone knows that there's a pretty hard limit. Everyone knows the term test flu, right?
Yeah.
And if that wasn't a common thing, people wouldn't know it. Well, if you have the flu, you're not going to grow.
Right.
If you have a fever, you're achy, you can't eat, and you're lethargic, you can't train, how are you going to grow? So at that point, the gear is essentially useless, or it could be counterproductive even, you know? So there is a line, and some people have a higher tolerance, but everyone has heard that term, which means it's a common thing that gets encountered. But as far as the insulin, yes, you're 100% correct. The caveat with that, though, is that the reason I don't like the Lantus is that this sport isn't a sprint, it's a marathon.
Right.
And you get about 10 years tops of pushing, especially the growth hormone, the insulin, before you get to the point of insulin sensitivity issues. And I don't want to use the word palumboism, but I don't, acromegaly, I guess, acromegalic symptoms from the GH. You get about 10 years max before those things come in. And max, meaning if you're smart about it. If you push it too hard, it can be even quicker than that. And you can see this if you look like a Jay Cutler from 2001 to 2011. You know, there's that start decline.
Yeah.
You can go 2001 was when he really went to task with things. You look at Ronnie from 96 to 2006.
And Phil Heath fell apart too.
Yep, yeah. Phil Heath's another one. Nasser Al-Sambadi. They're all Marcus Rule. It's right at that 10-year mark. So you have to be really. I don't know the word really. Make sure what you're doing is what you're doing. Because if you're 21 and you put that 10-year, you start that 10 years at 21, at 31, you're falling off a cliff, and you're still 8 years away from your peak as a bodybuilder. So you lose your entire career of money making, of physique, of winning contests, all because you wanted to get there a little quicker in your 20s. And so that's my thing with the Lantus. Can I say real quick with the metformin also? What I don't like about the metformin is it works in cyclic AMP, which is an anti-inflammatory process. It's sort of like what NSAIDs work through. That's anti-hypertrophy. That's counter to muscle growth. And so metformin actually counters hypertrophy. It works against muscle growth. Now, I use the phrase, it's like adding a deck chair to the Titanic. You know, if you're on gear, it's not going to reverse muscle growth, obviously, but it isn't helping it. And so that's why I like to use Berberine. And not to tout my supplements, but I don't know if I have one over here. But yeah, that's why. So because Berberine actually works through IGF-1. Which is actually more insulinogenic on a milligram per milligram basis than actual insulin.
You know what's funny is I know metformin supposedly suppresses IGF-1, and I'm just using these cheap ass Chinese blue tops, Justin. And I had my blood work done recently. My IGF-1 levels were 501.
Well, that's kind of the deck chair on the Titanic. Yes, it suppresses IGF-1, but if you're taking exogenous GH, it's same thing. Like you can remove a deck chair from the Titanic, and technically the Titanic weighs less, but it's not really a noticeable difference. Well, so those things it does reduce IGF-1, but it's not, you have to take things into context. How high have you raised IGF-1 with other things?
Yeah, so I used Berberine too. I think I talked to your partner this weekend, but he's going to send me some of the glucose disposal suppressor that you have. I'm going to try that out too. But I have used Berberine quite a bit. But part of me wonders too if guys don't fuck themselves up from pushing so much food and not managing glucose levels. I know a lot of guys aren't paying attention to it.
Oh yeah, that's part of the 10-year thing. Because even there's only so much you can do if. Like your high day was probably close to 1,000 grams.
Yeah, 1,000, right around 1,000. So
you're putting 1,000 grams in your body of carbs and adding insulin on top of that. It doesn't matter how hard you train, how much cardio you do. That's a pathway to diabetes. I mean, it just is. If you want to take some Joe off the street and have him eating 1,000 grams of carbohydrates, and let's say he wasn't taking insulin, but his body naturally produced too much insulin. I mean, that is what causes diabetes. That causes the tissues to be desensitized. So you have to be on top of improving that sensitization. And that's a big thing people don't understand, is because the insulin, like insulin's a molecule, it's a hormone that floats around, and
Right.
it exerts its action by, it binds to a receptor on the cell. And when it binds to that receptor, it sends a signal that shuttles some proteins in the cell and let nutrients come in. So it's a two-step process. And so when these receptors get desensitized, that's the early diabetes, and that's when blood sugar will start rising, because the sugar can't get taken up by the cell, because when insulin binds to it, it doesn't exert the same effect. And so the one thought would be, okay, well, I'll add more insulin, and that solves the problem early on. The problem is it's the insulin that's causing the desensitization. So
Right.
if you don't have something working on those receptors as well, you're fighting a losing battle. You're walking on an escalator that's going the wrong way. You can run really fast, but eventually, you're going to tire out.
I mean, my thought process was, and maybe I'm off base about this, and this is just kind of me thinking, I have an engineer's brain, but thinking that, if I were a young bodybuilder, I would want to maintain maximum insulin sensitivity and take pressure off of my the beta cell and the pancreas from burning out. I think a lot of guys just end up frying their beta cells out, man, and can't make enough insulin to keep up with the food they're eating anymore. So I don't know, I thought, and I've seen some studies and some information on it. People are starting to consider prophylactic use of Humalog to prevent some of that. So
yeah, that's an interesting thing.
I don't know what the long-term consequence is, though.
Well, that's that's an interesting one, because the beta cells they do get burned out, but they don't get burned out. That's a secondary, like type 1 diabetes. Well, and there's things with that, and there's autoimmune actions that happen, and you can get, and actually you've seen that a lot with COVID now, actually.
Yeah.
One of the interesting responses with COVID is the body deciding that the beta cells, so the way the beta, they don't really get burned out. What happens is the body sees them as a foreign substance. It's an autoimmune response, and then it starts attacking them as a foreign substance. And that's typically in response to like an illness or something. And so it's rarely that I hate saying these things because there's always a counter case to everything, but it's rarely the inability to produce insulin. It's almost always the desensitization of the tissues. And so what I want to say, because I'm not saying what you're doing is incorrect, and it's age dependent, because you're not 21 years old.
Right.
So when you get to the point where, if you're in your 30s, you have less than a decade till you're at your peak. At that point, that's the time to take the brakes off, because that is the time to do it.
Right. Yes.
People watching this, that's why I always try. I word that poorly because it's an age thing. If you're in that 10-year span where at the end of 10 years you're going to be over you're 42 or whatever, and that's past your bodybuilding peak anyways, that's the time to do these things. If you're short, more than 10 years away from your limitation, I don't like overworking I don't like overdoing the insulin portion. I want to focus on the receptor portion.
Yeah, I mean, if it's unnecessary, don't put, less drugs is always better for your health long term. I mean, that's just really that simple. But
well, the problem is I probably should have, I don't think I worded this properly. There's certain things that you can't avoid in the sport if you want to go as far as you can go. And so it's less of a don't do them. It's more of a make sure you're doing them at the right age range, which you are in that age range.
I'm old, dude. I'm 48.
Yeah. Are you that old? I thought you were 39 or something.
No,
okay,
man.
You were a little younger than me. Yeah. So you got nothing to worry about. But I am not a huge fan of Metformin, especially when there's receptor action products like Berberine that I think, not a milligram for milligram basis, but I think 1,500 milligrams of Berberine tends to produce about the same effects as 1,000 milligrams of Metformin, but the action is through IGF-1 to improve receptor sensitivity rather than on cyclic AMP.
I did notice my glucose levels did drop when I added Berberine to it. So what is in your product? What do you guys have in your glucose?
So we have Berberine, and it's 1,500 milligrams, which is the dose that I've over a decade or more of using this with clients. I've tried all types of things, and it always settled on about 1,500 milligrams. Seems to produce the same improvement in A1C and fasted glucose and even post-meal glucose readings as 1,000 milligrams of metformin. But we also have cinnamon powder, which cinnamon kind of helps increase the bioavailability of the berberine. And then we have biopyrine. It's not biopyrine, it's black pepper. Biopyrine is a brand name you can't really get, but the black pepper does the same thing. And then we have fenugreek. With fenugreek actually works, is one of the few supplements that works on the first pathway to increase insulin production. And so I went through this whole spiel about focusing on the receptor, but we actually do work through the
both pathways.
Yeah. Fenugreek actually works that kind of increase the body's insulin response in response to carbohydrates. And it's got a ton of cool benefits. It's actually really good for breastfeeding women, actually. It helps increase their milk production through that same kind of pathway. I don't think berberine is good for breastfeeding, though, so I wouldn't recommend this for breastfeeding women, just that one product. And then our alpha-lipoic acid, our ALA, which has been around forever, is a very good GDA.
I don't know if you saw today, there was a headline on CNN about metformin that they found they did a long-term study and found that it increases birth defects with men. It causes mutations to sperm, evidently.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. There's a lot of interesting things about metformin. See, the thing is insulin's an aging hormone. I mean, it really is, because it accelerates the processes in the bodies. And that's really what aging is generally an acceleration, that you have so many things that can happen in your body. And then as the more of them happen, you're ticking off a number, basically. But I mean, that's really not what it is. It involves telomeres and stuff. But the metformin's got a lot of really interesting anti-aging benefits. And there's a lot of studies in how it affects aging, especially in women. But again, aging, hypertrophy is a kind of an aging process also. And so it's still, again, is kind of counter to that. That's the problem, is you always, like, people use the word health, and something like it's healthy. And health means that is such a loaded word, because do you mean health as in how long I'm going to live? Because
it's relative.
The way you approach things, if you want to be healthy to live a long time, is completely different than if you want to be healthy, meaning you want to be incredibly active and live a vigorous, lifestyle, which is entirely different if you think healthy means, you want to be able to run a long distance, or healthy means you want to have a low body weight, or whatever it is. They're not even related, because the practices and the dietary practices are completely different in some ways, because the way to live the longest is basically to eat as close to starving to death as possible without actually starving to death. And so if you think health has anything to do with being like, your vigor or your energy levels or anything like that, then living a long time is counter to that.
That's what I tell these guys all the time. They come to me and ask me for advice, talk about longevity and bodybuilding. I'm like, dude, you're in the wrong fucking sport, man. Yeah. This is you're not doing anything to increase longevity. No. Now you can reduce risk, but if you're smart about how you do things,
that's one of the key things. The working on the insulin receptor is one of the key things that we can do to kind of reduce the aging effects that we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much. When you look at the scientific literature, so many poor health outcomes are related to poor glucose control.
Oh yeah, well that's what's crazy. It's like it blows my mind when people don't want to drink diet sodas, or
they're worried about cancer, but they don't care about fucking diabetes.
Half of us, 1 in 2, half of us are going to die of obesity-related illness, and almost all of those include insulin sensitivity issues and diabetes and elevated blood sugar. So whatever you think the risk of dying of cancer is, unless it's 1 in 2, unless it's a 50% chance, you're better off taking the diet soda. I mean, it blows my mind people's thought process, and that because that's what, especially in America, that's what we're all going to die from. We're all going to die from insulin, basically.
Yeah, get these dudes that are, they won't take a blood pressure pill, won't drink diet soda, but then they're cool with tren.
Yeah.
The logical fallacy there.
The blood pressure blows my mind too. It's like people think pressure has somehow, like if you have high pressure in your body, you're stronger. I don't know what the thought process with that. But the thing is some of the medications that improve blood pressure, like ACE inhibitors, can actually increase IGF-1 production all over again. And then in addition to that, ACE inhibitors and then ARBs to some extent, they increase like blood flow to the microvasculature. So if you want shredded glutes on stage, you can't spot reduce. But what's one of the main reasons why glutes are difficult to lose fat from? you need blood flow to oxidize the fat. And, that's a low blood flow area. If you can increase blood flow to the microvasculature, the areas that don't get much blood flow, it's not going to be a dramatic difference. But if we're talking like 0.5% of a difference is something you're going to want. And so like something like an ACE inhibitor like lisinopril can actually, improve that. So why would you want to die from high blood pressure and also step on stage with soggy glutes? It's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, it blows my mind. I've really been looking a lot into ARBs. They're a very interesting class of drug and do some really fascinating things. I recently switched from lisinopril to telmisartan. Yeah. So I'm giving that a whirl and seeing. I just, my blood pressure never gets too crazy, but I do it as, prophylactically. And it also seems the stuff that I've read about telmisartan, it seems to lower hematocrit as well.
Yeah. It's a really good, it was almost like it was designed for bodybuilding. Blood pressure is what kills bodybuilding.
Yeah. But at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, it's kidneys that kill it, but what raises kidney? It's blood pressure and then goes back to blood sugar. I mean, those are the two things,
kidneys, cardiovascular disease.
So control your blood sugar, work on the insulin receptor. And that's what's there's no reason. The only reason to step away from bodybuilding with health issues is stupidity, really. I mean, there's ways to mitigate all the real issues. There's no direct, none of the things we do cause direct problems. They don't, anabolics don't cause heart attacks. Anabolics don't hurt the kidney. And in some ways they can actually, the fact that they're going to increase protein synthesis and lower your BUN. I mean, blood urea nitrogen is actually a measure of anabolism. When that's lower, you're actually anabolic.
Right.
And so they can actually, from their natural function is to improve kidney function through that method. If you talk about, protein affecting kidney function, but so there's nothing direct, but it's the secondary effects. The fact that they raise blood pressure a lot, and then the fact that like you eat so much that your blood sugars remain elevated, and then also the insulin won't raise blood sugar, but it will pound those receptors basically.
Yeah, and it all seems to be that at least from what I've read, that androgens antagonize that renin, angiotensin, aldosterone pathway.
Yeah.
That's where all the problems have it. So I think a lot of times guys think they're bloated up from estrogen, and it's not even estrogen.
No, you'll see. Yeah, get your blood pressure under control and watch how much better your water levels are controlled.
Yeah. So and something like telmisartan will take some water off of you too, man. So
you'll see. I mean, it's funny because you'll see. You'll see sometimes guys who use THC will think it's like a diuretic, and really what it is it's that their blood pressure was sky high or higher, and they get relaxed.
Makes the blood pressure down.
Yeah, and they start peeing more.
Yeah, that's funny. So let's talk about. This is a question I get a lot from guys. Like, I don't think they can wrap their heads around how the carb cycling works with fat loss. I tell dudes I'm eating, 1,000 grams of carbs and a cheat meal on a high carb day, and they're like, "How the fuck are you losing weight that way?"
Well, it cheats the system. So how does the body work? The body's no different. You fill your car with gasoline, and if you put 10 gallons of gas in, that's how many gallons you can use. That's it. That's the way it works. Food's the same way. How many calories you eat, if you burn more than those calories, you have to find those calories from somewhere else, and your body pulls it from stored calories in the body. The problem is we don't just have gasoline in the body. It would be like if we have diesel, we have gasoline, and we have transmission fluid. There's like 3 fuel sources or something. I guess you can use transmission fluid in some old diesels a little bit, but they actually will burn. But anyways, so we store energy as protein, which is muscle. We don't ever want to burn that. We store it as carbohydrates, which is glycogen. We want to minimize that because we want to be able to use that when we want to use it around training. And then we store it as fat. And there's almost an unlimited ability to store fat, obviously, because there's 1,000-pound people. So those are our 3 pathways. Now, when we go into calorie deficit, we burn glycogen first. That starts getting depleted, and then we burn stored fat. And both of those get depleted. And if the glycogen gets depleted too much, your body will have to force something called gluconeogenesis, which is creating new glucose. Genesis, create, new glucose, create new glucose from protein. And that's when you can actually start breaking down muscles. So we don't want the glycogen to get too low. So what do? So with the high carb day, what we've done is we've created an artificial state where glycogen is really low. And now on the high carb day, we eat more calories than we burn. And so we're going to store those calories. That's thermodynamics, that's conservation of energy. You cannot get around that. But because we've created the situation where you're deficient in glycogen, and we supply most of the calories from carbohydrates or glucose, which is going to be stored as glycogen, we create a case where we eat more than we burn, and we do store those calories, but because of the special circumstances, we store them as glycogen rather than fat. What that does is it restores thyroid function, it restores your glycogen, obviously, so you can train harder, and it preserves muscle mass, and it keeps your metabolism higher, and it positively affects leptin and ghrelin to help your hunger hormones a little bit. Minorly, obviously, it's like that's a deck chair on the Titanic again, because your hunger hormones are going to be ruined in prep anyways. But that's what you do. So we've created this state where we are eating more calories than we burn. We've just set it up so we've hacked the system so that we're storing those calories as glycogen rather than fat, which it proves the rest of the week. Everything else is better the rest of the week. We have glycogen to fuel our training. So we can push harder in cardio to burn more fat, and we can take the calories lower on those other days without worrying about muscle loss.
Yeah, that's what I keep trying to explain to guys, that you can't violate the thermodynamics. You can't violate conservation of energy.
Yeah, that people think like but if you think about it, anything else we use energy, you can't turn your light bulb on without electricity. You can't drive your car without gas. You can't. If you could create energy from nothing, we wouldn't have to use oil. We wouldn't have to use electricity. We would just snap our fingers and have all the energy we wanted magically.
So with the carb cycling, essentially what you're doing is you're putting it in the gas tank to save for later. Putting it in the glycogen stores. Because you have like you said, the reserves. You have muscle protein. You have glycogen stores, and then fat stores.
We're not putting.
We don't want them in the fat. I noticed too, and I don't know if it has. You talked about effect on T3, but I noticed it does seem to have some sort of metabolic effect too. Like last year, I noticed throughout the week when I was on my contest prep that my fat loss would get lower as the week would go. I'd hit my high day. Usually the last 2 days before my high day, I really didn't lose much. And then I hit my high day, and then it was just like after the high day, it just somebody relit the flame.
You're all sweaty the next day. You're hot. You're starving the next day. And think about it. You have to think how the body works. The body doesn't have a thought process. It's just this systems of things running into each other. Carbohydrates under the body. It breaks them down eventually into the simple sugar, glucose, which is then small enough to bump into the walls of the small intestine and pass through. And then it floats around the bloodstream. Until it finds a cell that insulin has been bound to, and it shuttles into the cell. And then if there's sodium and water present, it goes up to the muscle. There's just things ramming into each other randomly, So the body doesn't have like a system for anything. So what happens is that when you supply an influx of calories, the body has more room for error, basically, and it can be less efficient, And so your body's always thinking your body's always geared for survival. And if there's an influx of calories, it doesn't mind being less efficient. It doesn't mind raising your body temperature. And historically, we didn't have clothes all of human existence. So raising your body temperature was really a powerful life-saving tool. So if it can like be less efficient with calories and uselessly produce ATP, or even produce through brown adipose tissue, like uncoupling a proton through like metabolic uncoupling to produce heat. If it can do all those things, it'll do it. It's a better survival tool, but it can only do that when there's a surplus of calories. And conversely, when there's not enough calories, the body can't be inefficient with anything. And so the only processes going to bump into each other are going to be the most efficient ones. Your body's not going to waste any insulin receptor. It's not going to. So there's you think it's morbid, but you can go to Somalia and see people that eat less than a week than we eat in a day, and they don't die, and they don't even weigh that dramatically less. The body just, their only processes that are happening in their body are the ones that absolutely must happen to survive that moment. There's no future survival. There's no storage process. There's no inefficient mechanisms that produce the heat, or, and so that's what happens. If you just lower calories, that works right away, but the body is always going to improve its efficiency, and that deficit's going to be that 500 calorie deficit on day one might only be 490 deficit on day 5. Well, you can imagine what it is on week 5 or week 15 if you don't reset the system with the high carb days.
I think that's where I was at the end of the contest prep last year.
You're
Dude,
running away.
I couldn't fucking think, man. I had to call into work. I'm like, guys, I can't work. I was losing my keys every time I took my car out. It was just shit like that. My brain was not working. So yeah, I've not that I'm starving like a Somalian, but I've been there before. So shifting gears, how does it work differently with the you're trying to add size in a hypertrophy phase?
Yeah, so it's slightly different because we're not restoring that glycogen. Kind of what we're doing in that case is, so typically what happens is, people think it would be the opposite, but in a diet, typically, if anything, the high days are even higher. And you'll notice when we get really depleted, sometimes we'll do mega high days where the high days are like, sometimes I'll say like, I want 1,200 grams of carbohydrates before your cheat meal, you know, and we would never really do that in the off season. In the off season, they're more mellow. Not always, they're more mellow proportionally. You know, the proportion of calories aren't as dramatically higher than they are medium low days. Even though the high days might be the same, they're closer to what the calories in the medium and low day are, and we'll have more of them. And so on those days, they're hypertrophy days, and it's the same process. So insulin, you know, Lantus, why that works so well for you. How does that work? We talked about it. Insulin floats through, binds to a receptor, shuttles some proteins around, and it increases an influx of nutrients. It increases amino acid uptake into that cell also, which increases the likelihood that protein synthesis will occur. So we want all those processes. And so we have the high days that do that. The problem is there's a couple problems. One, why don't we just do all the high days every day then? Well, the insulin sensitivity starts going to shit in a hurry. We can't do that. We take the insulin on the high days. You know, if we're taking Humalog 3 times a day, 7 days a week, that 10-year process is going to be accelerated into, you know, 2 years basically.
Right.
And then also fat gain. You know, we're always towing the line of how many calories we can eat to maximize muscle growth without causing too much fat gain. And you're never going to get perfect because you're going to want to overshoot the number. You know, whatever that number is, you want more calories than that to make sure you maximize muscle growth. But there's going to be some fat gain with that. You want to get as close to the line as possible because you don't want to lose out on any muscle growth, but you have to overshoot it somewhat. And those high days absolutely overshoot it. So if you have too many of them, then you're going to overshoot even further. So how do we mitigate that? Well, in the off season, our medium days would be the other training days that aren't high days. Those are more just standard days, standard bodybuilding days, you know, moderate protein, moderate carbohydrate, moderate fat. Most of the carbohydrates are around training, nothing special about those. So we still need those to be hypertrophy days. So what do we have left to kind of counter the over plus side, the over influx of the high days is the off days. So on the off days, we take carbohydrates, you know, quite a bit lower and maybe increase the fats a little bit. And we have enough protein, get enough healthy fats and enough calories to make sure that, you know, recovery and repair of your training can happen. But we take the carbohydrates maybe a little bit lower to the point where we hope that maybe a little bit of glycogen depletion occurs so we have room for the carbohydrates on high day.
I noticed this past year, I mean, this was really my first full off season working with you, but I stayed leaner than I ever have.
Yeah.
I like my
11-week out picks are a testament to that. I mean, they don't even look like the same person.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. Compared to last year, you know, I'm significantly leaner than what I was. I don't really feel like I did anything different. It just, you know, it's just the process, I guess, going through the process. But it is definitely a different way than I've ever dieted and run nutrition before. I just pretty much would eat the same thing every day. So
yeah, and that is the problem with it is it's more exhaustive, or not, you know, it's more involved. It is, you know, because bodybuilding is already an exhausting sport. You know, you got to prep your meals, you got to, you know, you got to train all the time, and so there's a lot involved. And so sometimes there is comfort in just like a standard meal plan, you know. But if you're going to go to the extremes, you need to do the extremes, and you're missing out on a little bit, I believe, with that. And I think you've experienced the same thing. And so, you know, that's what it's easier to do the basic meals in the off season, and you think, well, how much difference can it make? But, you know, like you look at a bell curve, you know, all the magic happens at the extremes. You know, you have a bell curve of intelligence. Most of the people live here, you know, like the Einsteins and Isaac Newtons live here, the Elon Musk. Well, that's where all the magic happens, you know. And so maybe they're only one standard deviation, or, you know, only a few percentage above the people at the top of this line here. You think, well, like, is 2% that big of a difference? Well, when you want to do something special, yeah, it is. It does add up, you know.
So what do you do with just regular people, just a regular Joe? I just, you know, I help a few people out, man. Dude, I could not see your average
it's
housewife
hard.
following a carb cycling.
And that's the thing. I mean, it's hard. And it's luckily what I do, it kind of minimizes that concern. Not a lot of housewives are finding me, you know, online. But I did work as a nutritionist for a cardiology group, so I did have to. You have to keep it way more basic. A lot of times we'll just do 2 different days. I will still want them to do a different diet on the days they work out with weights, and then the days they don't work out with weights. So there's lots of different things that we can do. Sometimes I just do straight calorie cycling because they're not going to be compliant with tracking macros. They don't want to learn it, and they'll say, well, just give me a diet, just give me food plan. And that, you know, it's, you know, if you're a overweight housewife who doesn't exercise, there's a reason for that, and you're not going to follow my food plan, you know. So I can tell you what meals to eat, but I can guarantee by day 3 you're going to be sick of it, and you're going to be looking for other things. So I want to teach you a way to build your own meals. So one way we do is we'll just straight calorie cycle. And so if they're say the metabolism is 1,500 calories a day, you know, we'll do these numbers don't quite work out because cardio is involved. But let's say there's no cardio, no workout. We're just doing the deficit from calories. If their BMR is 1,500 calories a day, we'll do like a base day of 1,000 calories. So they burn 500 calories there. And then we'll do like an extremely low day of like 800 calories. So they burn, you know, 700 calories there. And then we'll do a higher day of like 1,700 calories or 1,800 calories. That's actually kind of the same thing as a high carb day. It just won't be, it's not as efficient, but you're not dealing with someone who's trying to be at that extreme. You're dealing with someone who's trying to improve their body composition a little bit. We'll do that, or I will do a more basic, like training days will have these like higher carbs, and then off days won't have higher carbs, but we won't do as much variation where each meal is different. You'll have like 4 meals of the same thing on medium days, 4 meals of the same macros on low day. Just more, I mean, it's really just a much more simplified and basic version of the same thing.
It's funny, even when I talk to the bros at the gym about carb cycling and I start going through the detail of what I'm doing, they start shaking their heads like, nope.
Yeah. It's the way, but I mean, how about you want something? You know, it's what, like, I don't understand that. I just don't. Because if you want to do something, why don't you want to do it the best you can? You know, I just don't. And because that's the thing too, is, you know, I was thinking about this. I think I talked about this at Elite maybe. Like, you know, like people talk about how difficult a sport is, or, you know, like if someone saying bodybuilding is the most difficult sport because there's, you know, you gotta eat, but anything you do, any endeavor, any work, any business, any sport, everything's equally as hard is from your perspective. Meaning, if you want to be as good as you can be, you have to work as hard as you can work. That's it. You know, yeah. Whether or not, like, where you end up is not necessarily up to you. What's up to you is how hard you work. And if you want to see how far you can get with something, why would you not work as hard as you can? I don't understand that.
I don't either, but that's 99% of people. Yeah, you know how it goes, man. And so, like, with let's say if I'm a football player or a power lifter or something, and a performance athlete, is there a difference between?
Yeah. I got you. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's the big thing is. So what we do is for appearance, which is entirely different than for performance, you know. And so like I'll have you have your high days on a training day, you know. And so the first thing people who see that will be like, well, but I train in the morning on leg day, so I should have the high day the day before leg day so I can have a good leg workout, right? And so no, that's not what we're doing. We're not trying to get a good leg workout. We're trying to maximize the results of the leg workout.
Right.
And that means we need the food during and after. But for performance, it's different. And an analogy I like to use that makes it easy, it's kind of an analogy in reverse, but let's say I was running to do cardio and I was trying to lose fat. Well, if I was running for my cardio and trying to lose fat, I wouldn't want to drink Gatorade or drink gel packs or anything like that to have sugar during the run, because that would be a different energy source. But if I was running a marathon for performance to set a record time, I would want to drink the Gatorade, eat the gel packs. I would want those things during the performance. So it's 2 totally different things. What am I doing the process for? If we're doing it to look better, if we're doing it to build muscle, we want the high day on the day so that all the meals during and after we're facilitating hypertrophy. If I'm doing it because I want to perform on a day, I want that glycogen in my system the day beforehand. And so the high day might be before the performance day.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So for a football player, if he has a game on Sunday, you would have them do the high day Saturday.
Saturday, yeah, yeah, because you're going to train on the glycogen you have on the day before. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're not trying to. We're looking to have a hell of a football game. We're not looking to see how much muscle we can build from what we did on the football field. Yeah.
Right. So you want to be fueled up and ready to go for the football game.
Yep. Yeah. And that's probably the best thing you can do for football. And like, I mean, I played at a real small college, and it was 20 years ago, but there was no thought process like that. And, if there's any strength and conditioning coaches or anything out there, if you got college kids playing on Saturday, force them to have extra meals at the meal hall or whatever, high carbohydrate meals on Friday. It will dramatically improve their performance over time. On Saturdays.
I played basketball, man, and I lived off of Taco Bell.
Yeah. It's like looking back, it's like wish I could go back and redo things. It's like, man, how much better could I have been if
Yeah, it was the same way. It was Taco Bell, and then I had a friend of mine occasionally would have some Anadrol. I didn't even know what it was, man. He's like, "Here, take one."
We used to load up on the rip fuel. That was just because.
Oh man, I love that shit.
Oh man, I'm amazed I never had a heart attack. They're just like eat handfuls of before a game like idiots, not knowing anything.
That and what was it? Hydroxy
160.
Hydroxycut.
Yeah.
And then they used to be able to get these yellow jackets at the gas station that were straight ephedrine.
The mini teas that 25 ephedrine, 50 caffeine. Yeah.
It was basically methamphetamines.
Yeah, we call it trucker meth. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to do that. See, that was my pre-workout. Guys talk about there was no pre-workout shakes back then, and I'm like, yeah, there was. That was my pre-workout shake.
We didn't need a shake. You were shaking from the ephedrine.
I remember finding that stuff. Yeah, there were. I can't remember that's when the shit got banned. Was there was a dude? I think he played for the Dolphins that his heart exploded in training camp.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to ask you about. And this is one that always bothers me, and I get these dudes that reach out to me all the time, Justin, that talk about gear, and it always seems to be like the smallest dudes that are taking the most shit, man.
It is, yeah. Well, there's just only so much I can do. It's not magic. What you can take 100 Anadrol a day. The Anadrol doesn't do anything. The Anadrol is increasing protein synthesis. Yeah. So like I try to think of ways to make analogies that kind of make it to simplify it, because there's like chemicals and stuff. There's a lot going on. You can think about it. Say your body's a house. You're trying to build a house, right? So now your training would be like the general contractor or the foreman. He's telling everyone where to go. We're training chest, which means we're telling everyone to work on this part of the house today. And then the gear, the anabolics would be like the number of workers you have. So the more you take more gear, you're going to have more workers, and they can get more done, provided that there's more materials. And the lumber and the nails and the things like that is the food. And so if you don't supply the food, it doesn't matter how many workers you have. And it doesn't matter how good your foreman is at delegating them. They need the materials, and they all work together. So you need the training, you need the foreman telling you, we're working on this part of the house. This is the layout. This is the structure, and it needs to be organized so there's no waste. And that's your training, and then you take the anabolics, that's your workers. We got a lot of workers working on it. And now we need to supply the materials, the lumber, that's your food. And if we supply enough of that we put all the workers to good use, it's going to dramatically increase progress on the home build. But if you don't supply the materials, and those workers are just standing around doing nothing. And that's what the gear does when you don't have the diet in mind. The gear's just floating around your system doing nothing, ready to build muscle, but it doesn't have the lumber.
Yeah, I've stolen that analogy from you. That's a good one. I've used it with quite a few people. But I get these guys all the time that are 165 pounds, taking 2-3 grams of gear, and then I talk to them about the diet, and they're not even doing shit. I mean, I'm like, you're putting additional load on your system for nothing.
Yeah. And that's fine. I won't even tell you not to take whatever you want. You're an adult. You want to, I don't care, be unhealthy, do it. But why are you taking that? Think of what it does. It increases protein synthesis. Are you supplying the nutrients to allow that to be increased?
Yeah. And I tell guys that more does work, but it's relative to what you're putting in your body. And there is, like you talk about bell curve, there is a curve to this too, where I think there is a saturation point where you hit, and then just the side effects start stacking up more than the actual additional benefit does.
Yes.
And I know you work with a lot. I know you've worked with a lot of guys that have been pros and stuff in the past, but generally the guys that I've talked to, unless they're lying to me, are all like taking somewhere between 2 and 3 grams a gear a week.
It's the same. Yeah, I mean, you'll get a couple outliers, but
real basic shit.
It's always the same. And the reason it's like that 2 to 3 grams, it's not that they decide on that. It's an analogy to this would be like incomplete if humans eat incomplete proteins only, we'll die eventually. And so like rice is incomplete protein and beans are an incomplete protein, but if you combine beans and rice, it forms a complete protein. So cultures that didn't eat a lot of meat eat a lot of beans and rice. Why? Not because they chose it, it's because the ones that didn't combine those died, And it's the same kind of the same thing. It's not that they decided it's not like some noble morality thing, like I'm not going to take more than 3 grams. It's that they tried it, and what happened? They got test flu. They were achy. They had they were welted up everywhere. They were lethargic. They had no appetite. All they wanted to do was sleep. They were achy. They couldn't train. They were running a fever. If you're running a fever, you want to sleep all day. You can't eat, and you have no energy to train. If you can't train, you can't eat. What is the gear going to do? And so that's why they fall in that range. It's just that's the range. That's the kind of maximum number that doesn't start producing those negative side effects.
I one time, just to try it. One time I tried 2 grams of test by itself, and it just made me sick as fuck, man.
Yeah.
I felt like I was going to die.
Actually, I use that as a pregnancy protocol. If you get so much free test floating through the body, I think that it directly stimulates the Leydig cells to reproduce sperm on its own. There's just so much influx. And that seems to happen around 2 grams of test. And ask anyone who's tried it, what's the hardest thing about the 2 grams of test protocol? The feeling like shit. You feel like you're right on the verge of a fever. You feel like you almost had the flu, but not quite. You want to do nothing but sleep. You're waterlogged and achy. You can't squat because you've got such a, you get a lower back pump brushing your teeth, and so, yeah, you'll see guys you'd think, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get pregnant and grow. This is awesome. No, you don't grow because now you're really struggling to get food down. You're so bloated. You feel full all the time.
Dude, I remember I was getting horrible calf pumps just walking into my house, like going up my stairs. I'd have to sit down walking up my stairs, and my calves would be cramped up from.
You do that, like you started that pregnancy walk.
Oh my God, it was horrible. So, and I know you and I talked about it with what I'm doing. You said where I'm at is suboptimal. I don't even use that much. I think relatively.
You're a little lower. Yeah, you're on the low end. It really. And it's different for everyone, but it seems like most people, it's a little closer to the 3 gram. I hate, that's kind of, most people can get to that level. It's almost always like around 2 grams of test, and you're going to start getting test flu. And so, you get to like 1,800 tests, 1,600 Provol or something like that. You're maxed out pretty much.
I mean, my thing is I have no illusions of being a pro at my age. And, I'm just doing this for the fuck of it.
Well, I wouldn't say no. I mean, Masters Nationals turned pro. I wouldn't say no chance at all. I think you have a very, very good one if you want to.
Well, maybe. I'm going to be 50 soon, so maybe I can compete with the really old guys.
It's not the 50. That's the thing. Masters ain't no joke. Half the time, the 40 class is harder or worse than the Open. If the only reason it's different is because some guys just do the Masters, but a lot of times 40, the guy that wins the 40 class, 40 and over, wins the Open anyways.
Well, the dude that kicked my ass in the show last summer, he think he got 3rd in Masters Nationals, and he was in his mid-50s.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing what you can do if you're intelligent about things. There's age. Yeah, 58, what 50 was when we were kids, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I try to mitigate the other health factors. I thought about pushing a little bit harder, but I'm just like, I'm making progress. So, and I'm like, how much more progress would I have made if I pushed it harder?
Well, it's a thing. I like to do the numbers with things like that, because you can kind of do the math and you say like, okay, well, how much of a difference would it be? Like 1%, It's like, well, yeah, I want that 1%. But if you really do the math, Ronnie Coleman was 300 pounds in shape. What's 1% of 300 pounds? 3 pounds. Does Ronnie Coleman look different at 297
no.
than he does at 300? You know what I mean? So it's like, so what's the cost, the risk analysis? Is it worth, hopefully getting that 1%, but potentially ruining everything? it's probably not. If you got a good thing going, keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather be able to sustain it for a few more years. I think, and that's the thing I keep telling guys, is that I think it's a long haul, man. You have to play the long game with this shit.
Yeah.
Maybe it was you or somebody else that used the example of Big Ramy, but
Yeah.
you look at him over, I think it was like a 6 or 7 year period.
Yeah. It's in comprehensive performance nutrition too. Yeah. No human on earth grew as fast as Big Ramy grew. He went from 220 pounds in like 2004, maybe. I can't remember. It was a 4-year span, whatever it was. I think it was like a 4-year span. He went from 220 to like 300-pound mass monster Big Ramy. And so it looks like he blew up overnight, obviously, he went from like 220-pound gym rat to the biggest human on earth in like 4 years or 5 years. But if you break it down by the numbers,
it's like 1.5 pounds a month or something like that.
Yeah, less. I think it was even less than that. Yeah, it's like, it was like, 1.5 pounds a month, less than 20 pounds a year, and that's what people don't get, is it even, well, Nick Walker's another example. Nick Walker blew up overnight. I mean, who has grown faster than Nick Walker? He probably grew faster than Big Ramy. Look at a picture of him from 2012.
I know, he looked like shit.
Yeah, and so he was busting his ass then, a decade ago, and so these guys want to look bigger next year. Nick Walker did it over 10 years, and no one has done it faster than that. So you think you're going to do it faster, you might want to rethink things. Maybe you will, but even then, what are you going to do it in 9 years? It's still getting done in 18 months.
I kicked myself in the ass for not pushing more when I was younger. I don't know if I told you or not, but I completely stopped lifting for 12 years, I think it was.
Oh, wow.
I did not. I stopped lifting in my mid 30s, like 33, 34, and I just started back up a couple of years ago.
Interesting. I kind of did the same thing. I bailed in grad school for a while.
I just got really frustrated with it. I remember I was a model on Intense Muscle, and then the guys were pissing me off on there, and I had a few guys that were helping out.
Almost the same experience. Yeah, mine was kind of just burnout on all that stuff.
And I'm like, I got kids and a business, and it's just like, fuck all this. Go focus on that. And then, I got divorced, and I'm like, I'm going to go back into the gym, and I started lifting and growing and kind of got bit by the bug again. But yeah, I think I think this is my this will be 4 years this year I've been back. So it's funny, Justin, because I lost like 70 pounds and got fatter at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, I know all about that. I did the same thing. I mean, not quite that much. I didn't take that long off, but I know all about that. Yeah, I did the same thing. Mine is just I was getting into math and physics, and I went back to grad school for math and physics, and I was just really busy with that. And it just got it's frustrating on the forums when you couldn't even talk about anything, because you're discussing things to people to an audience that aren't experts, and so you could be saying 4 + 4 is 8, and another person is saying 4 + 4 is 12, but they're doing it in all caps, and they're willing to reply more than you are, and so it's like, well, I don't care if these people know this or not or agree, so I'm just stating something, take it or leave it, I don't care, but I don't want to get into it. So it got to where you can't post anywhere without it turning into that. And I don't mind like the discussion, and I love the discussion, but it's like it's difficult to it just got like annoying. It just kind of got over it, and that was just really into grad school, and that was taking all my time, and I just kind of fell off.
Yeah, it was the same way with me. I went back to school, got a degree in computer science. My original degree was in music. I see you got the guitar back there.
Yeah. What would you play? Like just
I play the guitar, piano, a bunch of stuff. My hands are all arthritic anymore, so it's really hard for me to play. So
it's hard with these fat fingers.
I got the GH hands. You can see them; they're gigantic.
Well, it's funny. Like I'll video myself playing, and it's like it looks like silly because I mean the nice thing is that I can play bar chords with my thumb around instead of barring.
Yeah, I don't do it that way. I do it the correct way. That's the way the blues guys play. Wrapping it around.
That was kind of what got me into it. Well, actually, what got me into it was I was working as a bouncer at a bar, and this band, the Groove Brothers in Michigan, and I've looked them up online. I wish I could find them, and they had a guitarist who was 100% as good as Stevie Ray Vaughan or any of those like classic Texas, like real thick, heavy strung Texas blues, and it just blew my mind. It sounded just unbelievable, and so I went out and bought a guitar and realized I'll never sound like that. But still,
guitars are another rabbit hole you can go down. I have about 10 of them. So
yeah, I try not to. I play piano. I used to play a little bit piano. I don't know theory, just completely, self-taught. I mean, I think I have a decent ear, and so I learn what the chords are. And
it's funny how many technical minds have a music well, music's very technical anyway. It's
very mathematic.
It's math, yeah.
It's like in my, I feel it feels like geometric, like geometric patterns on the fretboard or the way they are on a keyboard, and there's only 12 notes, and and they all, I mean, I don't know the theory between, like the fifths and everything, but it's like the patterns it's really mathematical. It's really kind of
it's all math. Yeah. And I really enjoyed the theory, and I like this is the thing with me. I go down these rabbit holes. I like to know how things work, and I rip them apart. And it's the same thing with music. I really, everybody hated theory, and I went down the rabbit hole with that. It's the same thing with this stuff too, man. Like I sit around and read fucking studies all the time. I don't
understand, like the people aren't curious kind of blows my mind, because I was thinking, that we have the internet. We used to not have that.
Yeah, so everything's at your fingertips.
Yeah, well, people just say something like, you'll hear someone say, like 35, you can only digest 35 grams of protein at a time. It's like, why? You don't have to just say that. Go online and you spend an hour, and you will have an answer that's completely garbage and means nothing, because what does that even mean? If you could digest, if you converted 35 grams of protein to muscle every day, you'd be gaining almost 30 pounds of muscle a year if you only ate 35 grams of protein. Actually, so there's no number that you can or cannot digest, and you can absorb an infinite number, because otherwise we would just eat a ton of protein and never get fat. The number means nothing, but that's the point. You don't have, people say it and they just say it and repeat it, but no one, like, it's like we have all these things that we say. We have the entire human existence knowledge at our fingertips, and it's like, it's exciting, but people don't, I guess people don't go down the rabbit hole. I like the rabbit hole.
They'd rather post memes.
Yeah, I like that too. But.
yeah, I look at them every now. So I have a few questions. I put a couple basic carb cycling videos up, and then I get tons of questions about it. And some stuff, and I know one of the things the guys wanted me to ask you about, and I get so it's amazing how butthurt people get over this topic. Is that, and I've heard you say you don't like people using protein powder, and I explain the reasons why you're better off eating whole food, and guys just get butthurt about that one.
I don't care. I mean, have a protein powder, but again, think of what it's doing. So what are you doing with the protein powder? No, you're getting protein. That's what's in meat. It's a supplement to replace protein when you can't eat the protein.
Right.
So why is it less effective? And you wonder, like, biological value or all those things. Well, do the numbers. If you have a 50-gram protein shake, let's say you convert that to, say that's the only thing that can convert to muscle. That's special than any other protein. You convert 50 grams every single day. If you do 50 grams times 365, that's 40 pounds. So from one protein a shake a day, if it worked, you'd be gaining 40 pounds of muscle a year.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like there's no. But so what does happen? Well, let's say you're gaining 20 pounds of muscle a year. You're not, because that's 200 pounds every 10 years, and no one's gaining 200 pounds every 10 years. But let's say you're some magical human who can keep that rate of protein synthesis up. Divide the pounds, convert it to grams, and divide it by 365, and you get 25. That's 25 grams of protein a day. That's how much protein synthesis you get. That's what you get to play with. That's how much muscle growth you get. On any 24-hour period, you get about 1 gram per hour of protein synthesis that you get to work with. What's the best way to maximize that? Keeping blood amino acids levels elevated consistently as much as possible. So what do you do with a protein shake? A whey isolate is going to digest in like an hour and a half. So if you only get 1 gram every hour of protein synthesis, you get 1.5 grams of that have any chance of being synthesized as new muscle. So if you're eating a 50-gram shake of whey protein isolate, you're not eating a 50-gram shake of protein isolate. You're giving yourself 1.5 grams of muscle growth at max. That seems like a waste. Where conversely, now let's look at a steak. And I use this analogy 1,000 times. Anyone who's heard me has heard me say this, but everyone at some point in their life ate a steak or something and then got sick, later on, and were throwing up 8 hours after their steak. And what are they throwing up? Chunks of their steak. So now that 50 grams of protein from a steak you get that 50 grams spread out over as long a period of time. So rather than shoving it down the system in an hour and a half and saying, okay, of that 50 grams, maybe 1.5 of it we can use to build muscle. The rest of it, we ran out of time. Now you're spreading that out, and you're giving yourself the optimal chance that a higher percentage of the protein from that is going to turn into muscle, because you only get that 1 gram an hour. And that's not like, there's no special thing about that. That's just a fact of, you're not growing more than you're not gaining 200 pounds of muscle every 10 years.
No.
And so you're not gaining 20 pounds. You might gain 20 pounds of muscle in a year or a couple of magical years, but even at that rate, that's only 1 gram of protein synthesis every hour. And so if a whey shake digests in a little over an hour, you're using all of that for 1 gram of protein. That's how much synthesis you get. There's nothing against them. They're just not an efficient source. They're it's like if I could fill my gas tank and only be able to drive for an hour, not be able to drive any faster, not be able to drive any differently. It's the exact same gas, only I get 1 hour of driving, versus another method where I fill my gas tank up and I can drive for 3 days, the same speed, the same miles per gallon, the same everything. It's still gasoline. Why? I'm going to use that. Well, the one that lasts for 3 days is the meat. The one that gives you an hour and doesn't even let you drive faster is the like whey isolate. And there's there's times when you can't eat a whole food meal. There's going to be, and that's when you use the protein. But there's no, and so people say, well, I want it after a workout. Well, why? Because you want a quick influx of nutrients after workout. If you are deficient in amino acids after your workout, you missed the boat. You fucked everything up. Where was your pre-workout meal? Where was your intra-workout meal? Where was your meal before your pre-workout meal? If you're going to a workout where you don't have any blood amino acids after a workout and you're breaking down muscle to keep those blood amino levels up, you've got way bigger problems than fixing that by shoving a protein drink to correct that after a workout's going to fix. You should never be deficient in blood aminos. And the way to get that way is to eat whole food protein sources.
What leading on the protein question, what protein sources do you like the best?
Well, it depends. All things being equal, probably red meat. I think red meat is probably the closest to our natural amino acid structure. And so you have to think, so there's something called a rate limiting amino acid. And so the essential amino acid that's in a protein source of the lowest quantity, that's how much protein synthesis you can get from that protein. So if we have 2 grams of all the essential amino acids and only 0.1 grams of one of the essential amino acids, you need all the essential amino acids at the site of protein synthesis to build new muscle, to synthesize muscle. So whatever the lowest quantity of that is, that's the rate limiting amino acid. And red meat is probably closest in natural structure to our own muscle protein amino acid layout. And so that means that the rate limiting amino acid is probably the one we want. It's not really limiting in that case. Now, any whole food protein is probably close enough. And so knowing that, then my second choice would be chicken. And in many cases, chicken would be the first choice because it's leaner and it gives us more efficient use of our calories, because then we get to be more precise with the fat calories that we aren't getting from the red meat. Because we only have so many calories to play with, especially if you need to look good. And so, we want to make sure the fats we have are there for a reason. And there's not like necessarily terrible things about red meat fats. They're just omega-6 and omega-9s and inflammatory fats. They're not health promoting. They're not doing us benefit long-term as far as, the health aspect that will allow us to stay in the game a long time. And so we want to maximize the amount of healthy fats, omega-3s we can eat. And we're not going to get those from the meat. We're going to have to get those from external fat sources. And the leaner chicken allows us some freedom to do that.
Yeah, I try to stick with low fat sources. I mostly just eat red meat and chicken. It just seems to agree with me. Even when I didn't really train, that's what I eat. It's so ingrained in my brain now. I'll have some eggs, sometimes, but it's like flank steak, top sirloin. I like a strip every once in a while, and then just chicken, and all the time. I'm lazy, and I get Walmart. They have the 96 lean ground beef.
Yeah.
And I get that, and I just chop it up, mix it with my rice.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do that too. Yeah, 96. Sometimes I'll do bison, which is usually like 90-10, but then I'll rinse that. I wouldn't do that when I competed, but I'm long past that.
I'm too cheap to get the bison.
It's
expensive as fuck, man.
I'll do it, but I'll do it when I want something that tastes good. Because
every once in a while,
if you rinse it, if you cook it and then rinse it, a couple of studies I found in that showed that it really ended up being maybe not quite all the way to 96.4, but like 94.6 or 95.5. You can see the fat bubbles, because when you heat the fat up, that saturated fat becomes liquid while it's still hot. And as long as you wash it away, you'll wash it through a soup strainer.
Yeah, I used to do the same thing. I'd rinse my meat off. And this
exactly.
stuff I get at Walmart, I don't know what the fuck they do to it, but there is no fat in it. There's nothing left in the pan.
It tastes amazing too.
Yeah, they have decent meat. It's surprising.
Really, I'm always blown away because we have like a farm meat market, where it's like farm raised meat, and it's because I live out in the boonies, and so you think and that is good meat. And so I always think okay, this is but then every once in a while I'll get some random steak at like a Walmart, or I'll get 96.4 beef at Walmart, and it's good as hell. I don't know where they're raising this cattle, but
yeah, I get the flank steak either there or at Costco. Usually are the two places I get it.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to ask you about too, bodybuilding. This is kind of the unspoken thing. I put a video up today, and I was surprised how many hits I get. But about food intolerances. Bodybuilders having issues with food. I've had issues with IBS over the years, and I worked with my gastroenterologist and went to more of a FODMAP style of diet, and it just made a life change for me. I mean, what do you do? I mean, what do you suggest for guys to do? What are some common foods that you see that cause issues for dudes?
Well, if you notice, my food list is basically a FODMAP food list.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty much a FODMAP
not
list.
Not exactly, but it's pretty darn close. There's a couple things, but yeah, I do that on purpose because I think that's really important. Low FODMAP approach. I think the problem is that because I have celiac. I can't eat gluten.
Oh, okay.
After years of making fun of people who can't eat gluten, I developed celiac, and now I can't eat it either.
It's karma, man.
Yeah. But I think I developed it at some point when I was a competitor, and I don't think I ever realized it. And I think it was because I never ate gluten, and because I was meticulous about my diet. So the only time I'd ever potentially eat gluten.
Well, celiac's an autoimmune thing, right?
Yeah. Well, and this is what I think. This is kind of what I think happens with a lot of cases. Actually, is I think I never ate it. And so my body never saw gluten, and then the weird case, like after a contest, I'd pig out for a day or two and I'd be sick as hell. And so because I'd probably eat gluten, and my body would have this influx of gluten that I hadn't seen in months, because even my cheat meals were almost always like sushi, and maybe there's a little bit of wheat in the soy. Sushi or like Thai food I eat a lot, which there's, or eat Mediterranean, which doesn't use wheat. And because I was never like a pita bread guy. So I just, rice, whatever. But so I never ate gluten. And so I think that's what happened. I think then like when I rarely would, my body would sense it as a foreign substance and attack it and eventually develop that whole process. And I think that happens a lot. I think you see the same thing with SIBO, with a lot of bodybuilders and candida. I think the high carbohydrate diet starts fueling kind of bacterial overgrowth in the gut, fungal overgrowth in the gut. I think the very limited food list, especially in contest prep, creates that autoimmune type cascade where you limit the foods the body sees to a very, very small range of foods. Then you can't really bring the different foods back in because the body's not, the body is an increased chance of recognizing them as a foreign body. I mean, and then that's me. That's more like observational. This intuitively seems like it could be what's going on. I don't have like any research or data, no subjects or research subjects to kind of work this on, but that's typically what I see or what I think is going on.
I mean, the shit that screws me up, I can't eat eggs anymore. Like eggs just are, it's an instant trip to shit my pantsville if I have eggs. Yeah. I don't know what the deal is with the eggs. It's eggs. I broccoli. I can't do broccoli. Yeah,
the seeds and broccoli. I think a lot of bodybuilders get. I think the diverticulitis. Get diverticuli in the gut. I mean, we're bombarding it with a lot of food that's not easy to digest. Especially in prep when you start loading up with oats. Oats are hard. They're a lot of soluble fiber. They're rice. If you're eating any brown rice, that husk is passing through. That husk is passing through. And if there's a fold somewhere in the intestine, that husk can get there. Kind of inflame it. That bubbles out. Now you got diverticulitis. And I think
I had a friend of mine who's a bodybuilder. Just a few months ago, he had a diverticuli burst in his stomach, and he's in the hospital. His colon's hanging out.
You can die from that.
Yeah. He's lucky he didn't die.
And you see, a lot of guys like get the J pouch and stuff, like that one. that guy who used to wear the bandana and the beard would scream in his car all sweaty.
Yeah.
He got Jake Fouch. He had a colostomy bag and then lost most of his colon, and Gavin Meadows had the problems. And so I think it's the very limited food sources, the extreme food volume, and I think a combination of that is just hard on the GI tract.
Yeah, I do get a lot of guys reach out to me with issues, and I know the FODMAP helped me out a lot, with that stuff, and I really have been trying to be aware, and I still think, guys, if you eat something and you've got indigestion, acid reflux, and you're farting, something's wrong, man.
Yeah, try change things up. Yeah, and there's a lot of issues too. A lot of people have like acid issues. It's a lot of times it's over acid, and because what happens is a lot of especially in prep, when you take orals, your body produces, when that oral starts dissolving in the stomach, it produces like a real surge of acid, and guys will get reflux. And a lot of times guys will blow out their sphincter from the vagus, what's that? Vasovagal, Vegas. What is it when you when you bear down? When you're training and you bear down, that puts pressure on that sphincter also. And so a lot of times they'll get that, and that sphincter gets kind of beat up and ruined. It doesn't close as well, and then they get like the acid production from the orals, and that kind of eats away at their esophagus. That causes problems. You get
orals are really rough on you. They don't agree with me, man.
My view on those. Use them as little as possible, never in the off season, minimum pre-contest. They just ruin everything. They have all the side effects.
They just make me feel sick. My stomach gets upset. Last year my liver values went through the roof.
A lot of them are hard on blood pressure. They cause reflux. They raise blood pressure. They make people feel, they're just hard, unnecessarily hard on the body for not a dramatic improvement over injectables.
I got one last question for you, and then I'll let you go, man. I know you got you got a busy day going on.
Alert dinging. I'm getting a calendar alert.
So one last question. I guess I've been putting my I don't know if you've seen them, but I've been putting up my progress updates, and I'll go through my diet, my protocols and everything. And guys keep asking me why you don't count every gram of protein.
I do. They're not explicitly counted. They're implicitly counted. And the problem is there's only so accurate you can be. You can count every calorie, but you're not counting every calorie. When your chicken says 22 grams of protein per 3 ounces, what do you think that comes from? If we picture humans as a meat, if we were going to eat human ground beef would be 15% fat. Why? Because the average human is 15%
the average human.
Fat. You're not 15% fat. Does that mean every human is? No, and chicken are the same. There's not a chicken. There's some chicken that's more muscular. There's some chicken that has more intramuscular fat. There's some chickens that have less intramuscular fat. There's some chicken sources that plump their chicken breast up with saline, and then intermix with all that. Where they get that food label number is whatever company you're buying from. At some point in the early to mid 90s, when they forced the FDA to come up with the food label, they took 100 pounds of chicken from whatever farm they're going to source from, and whatever calorimetric measure, heating it, cooking it, whatever, where they broke it down, and they took the average of all those chickens at that time, 35 years ago, were roughly these macronutrients. And now 35 years later, you have that, and you're taking it down to the gram. It's not. A particularly fatty chicken is going to have more fat per 100 grams than a particularly lean chunk of 96.4. The same thing, 96.4. What do you think that's synthesized at like Pfizer? They're approximating 4%. It's not going through there's not guys in spacesuits and like double vacuum sealed rooms dropping droppers to get that to exactly 4%. So your 96.4 might be 97.3 today, it might be 95.5 tomorrow, it might be 96.4 the next day, and those numbers are a big difference over time. So a particularly fatty chicken breast is going to have more fat than a particularly lean 96.4 batch. And if you count the exact calories, you're going to be inaccurate beyond. What people are doing when they're trying to do that is they're being inaccurate. They're trying to measure accuracy beyond the natural variation in the food source, which just produces a new level of inaccuracy that you're not accounting for. So what we're doing is, there's a bell curve. So all my protein sources are about the same thing, meaning that, like I use the 96.4, the chicken, turkey breast, eggs in a 6 white to 1 yolk ratio. All of those are in the same ballpark where a particular fatty version of one could be fatter than a particularly lean version of the other, meaning there's crossover. They're all close enough where you can't guarantee that the chicken, even though the food label of the chicken you have says it has a 0.5 gram of fat less than the 96.4 ground beef, you can't guarantee that. And there's many cases where the ground beef is going to be leaner. And so they're all in that sphere where you do, a bell curve, meaning that over time, by not counting that, it cancels out the inaccuracies and the natural variance of the food that you can't account for. And it's the same thing with the rice. When you're counting it, you count 168 grams as whatever, 50 grams of carbs or whatever. From what? Where was the rice cultivated? What was the humidity in the room when you weighed it? Because if it's summertime, those rice grains, they soak, they fluff up in water because they soak up the water. Well, if you're in a humid summer climate, it's doing the same thing sitting in the box. So are you measuring that rice in the summer, or are you measuring it in the winter? Because when it's 5% humidity in the winter, you're getting a different measurement. And that variation is more than the difference in variation of the way I measure things by counting the direct calories. So you can count every calorie, but you're not counting them. You're like calming yourself by ignoring the natural variation that's already in the food and counting to a level of accuracy that you can't measure. It's like when people would, when I was an engineer, people would send an Excel calculation to 75 decimal places, and it's like, this is a real item. You just gave me the dimensions to half the width of a proton. We can't machine it to that, just because Excel did the math and came out with that many decimal places doesn't mean it's a real number. And that's the case with it. And so what we're creating, a physique develops over a decade, and what you need to do is you need to do the correct things, the main things right as much as possible, and do them as consistently as possible. And that's what produces the result. Trying to be precise just to be precise, where the level of natural variation in the food is greater than your precision you're calculating to, means that your numbers now mean nothing. We don't know, they just don't, and anyone's taken a statistics class or done anything like any engineering or machining knows those things. You're doing numbers just to placate yourself. They're not real numbers, just because it says it on the food label doesn't mean your chicken was that. It means some average conglomerate of chickens 25, 30 years ago, when they developed the food label, averaged out to roughly that number.
Funny story on that one. My training partner used to be a butcher at Whole Foods, and I was asking him about the meat, and he's like, how we determined what was 93.7 ground beef? He goes, I just looked at it and said, that looks like 93.7, and threw it in the grinder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But people are counting that to the 10th of a gram of fat. I see people saying 1.2 grams of fat. It's like, it wasn't synthesized in a lab. You can't get it to the gram. You can't get it within 3 grams. And
that's all relative anyway. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that whether you count your chicken as 2.2 grams of fat per 100 grams or 2.1 grams, none of that changes your physique. All it does is introduces a level of accuracy that increases inaccuracy. It doesn't help anything.
Unnecessary complexity.
Yeah, and that's the most frustrating thing, because it takes a level of nuance. It's slightly counterintuitive, and you have to think a little deeper into why. You can count those numbers, but they're not real numbers. So what I do is I remove the natural variation, the numbers that we can't account for, and I keep, so every number, all our calculations are correct and exact as you can, as precise as you can be within that boundary of the natural variation. So our numbers actually are true, because we're not trying to calculate things we can't calculate. And so so when we make a change, we know we're making that change, because we're changing the things that we can actually account for to the level
can control for. Yep.
Yeah.
I see it all the time at work. I manage a team of engineers, and they just get caught up in the minutia. And I'm like, guys, you got to focus on. You got to look at this from the 30,000 foot level.
We get that all the time. Yeah, we're machining this to the half the size of a proton. I don't think we can cut it that close.
It's crazy. Well, I appreciate your time, man. Are you still taking coaching clients, or are you done with that now?
No, I'm still taking clients. I'll never, I don't know that I'll ever stop. I just love it too much. I have openings right now. I'll probably slow down as the supplements take off more. But I'll always take on a good client. There's most of the really exciting things in this sport that have happened in my life in the last 15 years have been with clients. And so I don't want to lose that, like someone like working with you has been a blast,
I appreciate that.
So, and I don't care what like if anyone's wondering, go to the contact us page on Troponin Nutrition and ask me. I don't care if you're a competitor, if you're a good competitor. I care that you want to work hard and you're interested in working with me. And the fun people are like your off season. If I only took people on the cusp of turning pro, I wouldn't get to watch people gain 80 pounds, 100 pounds in an off season. I've had like Dominic Trevlini had an off season like that. Ben Pollock had one like that. You had one like that. And Dominic was a little closer, but none of them were. And Ben hadn't even competed in a bodybuilding show. He's a pro now, not with me, with Shelly. But I would not, if I only focused on like a certain level of competitor, I would never got to do any like all the really cool clients I've had over the years. So if you think I won't work with you because you're lower on the rung or something, don't think that. Message me, and if there's a spot for you, I'll be happy to.
I've definitely told some people to reach out to you. I think there's been some people from my gym that work with you actually, but
cool, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty.
We have a really cool group. I mean, it's like that's why I'm doing the Team Troponin website. I never advertise. I hardly even do social media. Every client I have.
You're missing out on so much money, man.
Yeah. But it's all word of mouth. It's all referrals, which I want it to be, because then the people working with me are there because they really wanted to, and they've heard good things about me. They're not, it's not because I have really cool images on Instagram or whatever.
And for the supplements, where do people go to check out your supplements?
First Attachment Nutrition or Troponin Nutrition, they're available there also.
Okay.
First Attachment Nutrition or firstattachment.com. My partner's ex-special ops, ex-military, and so we kind of have that military slant on it, which I think most people appreciate the military and what people have given to the country, and so we want to benefit that, and most companies do, but because he's in the military, it makes a very nice naming convention also, because one of the most difficult things with the supplement line is what to name everything. So that really helps. So,
I like the branding. It's great. I talked to him for a good while this weekend. He seems like a cool dude.
Yeah, he loves to talk. Yeah, no, I couldn't do it without him, because I got all this as far as the ingredients and how to, what works and what doesn't, but I'm not a salesman. I'm not a talker. I'm not the guy who can make just cold. I have like phone anxiety. I hate talking on the phone. And so we really work well together, because it wouldn't work with it if it was just me, for sure.
I'm the same way, dude. I'm an introvert. This stuff is painful to me. I'm forcing myself to do it.
That's why I was so cold. I was, it's Michigan March. It's like 8 degrees outside. I put every window down because I knew I would have that like anxious sweat going on.
I do the same thing. I sweat too, man. I appreciate you taking the time, man.